something happened years ago that could now become one of the most important decisions surrounding King Charles, and almost nobody noticed. In 2022, Parliament quietly changed the rules and placed Princess Anne and Prince Edward inside the King's constitutional backup system. At the time, it looked like routine paperwork. But now, with Charles facing ongoing health challenges, that forgotten decision suddenly carries a very different meaning. Because Anne was not simply added to a list, she was given a permanent constitutional role that could allow her to step in when the king is unavailable. And here is the part that raises the biggest question. Why was Princess Anne chosen? And what did Charles already know when those rules were changed? The answer takes us back to a quiet decision made years before the headlines began. Parliament changed the rules, but one detail made the decision far more significant. Princess Anne and Prince Edward were given permanent places as counselors of state. At first, it looked like a simple constitutional adjustment. But in reality, it created a much stronger safety net around the monarchy. And now, with growing attention on King Charles's health, that decision from 2022 suddenly feels far more important. On paper, the wider group of counselors of state can include several senior royals. But in practical terms, the names that matter most are Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward. And among them, Anne is different. She is not the future monarch. She is not married to the king. She has no personal path toward the throne. Instead, for decades, she has built her reputation around one simple idea. Show up, do the work, and keep going. That makes her especially valuable when the crown needs someone dependable. But what does her constitutional role actually allow her to do? To understand that, you have to look at something most people barely notice: the famous red box. It may look like an ordinary leather case, but inside the British constitutional system, it represents a constant flow of government business. Official papers, state documents, briefing material, and other matters requiring royal attention are regularly prepared for the monarch. The important point is that government business does not stop just because the king is unavailable. The country still needs decisions processed. Official meetings still take place. Ambassadors still arrive. Documents still need attention. That is where counselors of state can become important. For certain duties, they can act on behalf of the monarch when the king is temporarily unavailable. Their responsibilities can include attending meetings of the Privy Council, signing approved documents, and receiving ambassadors. So, when people hear that Princess Anne has a constitutional role, they should not think of it as simply another royal title. It gives her a real legal function within the machinery of the monarchy. If the king is away or temporarily unable to carry out certain duties, Anne can help keep those parts of the system moving. And that distinction matters. She is not becoming queen. She is not replacing Charles. She is not taking the throne away from William. Instead, she is part of the backup structure that allows the monarchy to continue operating when the sovereign cannot personally handle every responsibility. But there are limits. Counselors of state do not simply receive every power held by the monarch. Some of the king's most important constitutional functions remain outside their authority. For example, certain major decisions involving the creation of peers, the appointment of a prime minister, parliament, and other constitutional matters remain reserved to the sovereign. That means there is a clear line between supporting the king and replacing the king. And that line is extremely important. Princess Anne can help keep the machinery of the crown running, but she cannot simply step into Charles's position whenever she wants. The king remains king. So why does Anne's role suddenly seem so important? The answer is timing. King Charles has been undergoing cancer treatment, and that has forced the monarchy to think more seriously about what happens when the sovereign needs time away from public duties. In March 2025, Buckingham Palace confirmed that Charles had experienced temporary side effects connected to his cancer treatment and required a short period of hospital observation. The announcement was carefully worded. It did not suggest that the king was stepping away from his constitutional responsibilities, but it highlighted something the monarchy cannot ignore. Even a determined and active monarch can sometimes become temporarily unavailable. And when that happens, the state cannot simply stop. Government continues. Official work continues. The crown continues. That is why the counselors of state arrangement matters. The system provides a way for certain responsibilities to continue without immediately creating a constitutional crisis. and Princess Anne is particularly well suited to that role because of her long record of service. For decades, she has been one of the most consistent members of the royal family. She has attended official events, supported charities, represented the crown, traveled abroad, hosted ceremonies, and carried out duties that rarely receive the same attention as major royal headlines. Her strength has never been about popularity or personal branding. It has been reliability. That is also why the 2022 decision deserves a closer look. When Parliament added Anne and Edward to the permanent group of councillors of state, it was not simply about adding 2 more names to a list. It addressed a practical problem. The old system had become increasingly difficult to use because some of the people who technically qualified were no longer working royals or were otherwise unsuitable for regular constitutional duties. Prince Harry was no longer a working royal. Prince Andrew had stepped away from public duties. That created an awkward situation for a system designed for a smaller and very different royal family. The 2022 legislation helped modernize the arrangement. And Anne's inclusion was especially significant because she already had something that no law could create overnight: decades of experience. She understands royal protocol. She understands official ceremonies. She understands government-facing duties. And perhaps most importantly, she understands what it means to represent the crown without turning every appearance into a personal performance. That makes her a natural part of the monarchy's emergency support system. But there is another reason her role matters. William is the heir to the throne. His future is already defined. One day, he is expected to become king. But today, he is still preparing for that responsibility while managing his own family and growing role within the monarchy, and has already spent decades inside the institution. That creates a useful balance. William represents the future and represents experience. Charles represents the present. Together, those roles create a structure designed to keep the monarchy stable through periods of uncertainty. And that may be the real reason the 2022 legislation matters so much today. The decision itself was not new. The legal framework was not suddenly created because of Charles's health. It had already been established years earlier. What has changed is the situation surrounding it. A constitutional safety net can look unnecessary when everything is going smoothly. But the moment the monarch faces a period of illness, travel, or temporary incapacity, that same safety net suddenly becomes extremely important. And this is where Princess Anne's role becomes more than a line in a legal document. She represents continuity, she represents experience, and she represents the idea that the monarchy should be able to keep functioning, even when its most important figure needs to step back temporarily. But there is still one major question. What happens if the king becomes unable to perform even the constitutional duties that councillors of state cannot take over? That is where the situation becomes much more serious. A temporary absence is one thing. A long-term inability to carry out the king's core responsibilities would be something completely different. That could raise the possibility of a formal regency under the existing constitutional framework. And a regency would be a major event. It would place far greater attention on Prince William, Parliament, the wider constitutional system, and the future of the crown. That is precisely why the current arrangement is so important. It provides room for the monarchy to continue functioning without immediately moving toward such a dramatic constitutional step, and cannot replace the king. But she can help make sure the institution keeps moving when the king cannot personally handle every duty. And after decades of quietly doing exactly what is expected of her, she may be one of the people best prepared to do it. The most surprising part is that none of this happened overnight. The groundwork was already there. The law was already changed. The roles were already established. The only thing that changed was how closely the public began looking at them. And now, with Charles's health making royal continuity a much bigger subject, a decision that once looked like routine parliamentary housekeeping suddenly appears far more important. Princess Anne was not suddenly transformed into the person keeping the monarchy together. She had already spent decades proving she could. The law simply gave that reliability a formal place inside the constitutional system. Even while dealing with serious health challenges, King Charles has continued carrying out a demanding schedule. But there is one reality the monarchy cannot ignore. When a monarch is undergoing major treatment, there may come a moment when he simply cannot be everywhere at once. And the state cannot pause. Government business continues. Royal duties continue. Important meetings still have to happen. Official documents still need attention. That is why other senior members of the royal family have increasingly stepped forward, including Princess Anne, Prince William, Queen Camilla, Prince Edward, and Sophie. Some constitutional experts have even discussed the possibility of what has been described as a soft regency. The idea is not that the king gives up the throne. Instead, he remains sovereign while trusted members of the royal family take on more practical responsibilities when necessary. And this is where Princess Anne becomes especially important. William is the future king. He is being prepared for a reign that could last for decades. His role is growing, and every responsibility he takes on is part of that preparation. Anne, however, brings something William simply cannot have yet: decades of direct experience. She has spent most of her life inside the working monarchy. She understands the demands, the protocol, the public expectations, and the quiet responsibilities that come with representing the crown. When Charles required hospital observation in March 2025, and reportedly visited her brother, and then returned to official duties soon afterward, she continued with an investiture ceremony rather than allowing the disruption to stop her schedule. That kind of consistency explains why her role has become so important. But Anne's story becomes even more interesting when you look at the historic title she carries. She is the Princess Royal. It sounds like a simple honor, but the title has a long and unusual history. Traditionally, the Princess Royal title can be given to the eldest daughter of the reigning monarch, but it is not automatic. The monarch must choose to grant it, and once granted, the title is held for life. Anne was born in 1950, the second child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. From a young age, she grew up at the center of the British monarchy, but unlike some members of the family, she eventually became known less for glamour and more for hard work. Queen Elizabeth II granted Anne the title of Princess Royal in 1987. At the time, it was a significant distinction. Only a small number of women in British royal history had held the title before her. But what makes Anne especially interesting is that the title is only one part of her position. She is also a counselor of state, giving her defined constitutional responsibilities when the monarch is unavailable. That means she is not simply attending ceremonies because she is a senior royal. She can perform certain official functions on behalf of the crown. She can host investitures. She can present honors. She can represent the monarch at important events. And under the rules governing counselors of state, she can assist with specific constitutional duties when required. This creates a rare combination, and has the historic status of the Princess Royal, while also holding a practical constitutional role within the monarchy. And there is another reason Charles can rely on her: her extraordinary work ethic. 4 years, and has consistently ranked among the most active members of the royal family. Her calendar is filled with engagements that range from charity work to military events, agricultural organizations, international visits, and official ceremonies. She does not simply attend the most glamorous occasions. A large part of her work involves organizations and communities that receive very little attention from the wider public. That is one reason her reputation has remained so strong, and rarely appears interested in turning royal duty into a personal brand. She does not constantly seek headlines. Instead, she has built her reputation through repetition. One event becomes another. One visit becomes another. One speech becomes another. Year after year, she keeps showing up. And the numbers reveal just how intense that schedule can be. In 2025, Anne reportedly carried out 478 official engagements. That is an extraordinary figure for any working royal, especially considering the wide range of responsibilities involved. But the number itself is not the most important part. What matters is what it represents. Hundreds of appearances mean hundreds of communities visited, charities supported, organizations recognized, and people given attention from the crown. That is how Anne has built her influence. Not through dramatic announcements, not through political speeches, and certainly not by chasing the spotlight. She has done it through decades of consistent service. That is also why her role becomes more significant when Charles faces periods of illness or reduced availability. William may be the future of the monarchy. Charles is the monarch of today. But Anne represents something different. She represents continuity. She knows the institution from the inside, understands its traditions, and has spent decades proving that she can carry responsibility without making herself the story. And that may be the greatest value she brings to the crown, because when a monarchy faces uncertainty, the person who keeps showing up can sometimes become just as important as the person wearing the crown. Princess Anne may not be next in line. She may never become queen, but her decades of service have placed her in a unique position, close enough to the center of the monarchy to matter, experienced enough to be trusted, and independent enough to focus entirely on the job. And with Charles's health making questions of royal continuity more important than ever, that quiet role suddenly looks much bigger than it did before. That number tells you something important. Anne's value to the monarchy is not simply about her title. It is about one thing she has demonstrated for decades: reliability. What makes Anne even more remarkable is that she did not slow down after losing the busiest royal label. She actually increased her workload. In 2025, she reportedly completed 478 engagements, around 10% more than the previous year. Her reputation has always been simple. She shows up and gets the job done. That continued into 2026, and hosted an investiture at Windsor Castle early in the year, and continued supporting causes close to her. Even after her son Peter Philip's wedding, she reportedly returned to official duties within days. But the bigger story is what all of this means for the monarchy. Charles has spent years strengthening the system around him. The Councillors of State Act 2022 brought Anne and Edward into a more permanent constitutional role, while addressing concerns surrounding royals such as Harry and Andrew. And with Charles continuing his treatment, the need for dependable support has become harder to ignore. The number of working royals has also fallen sharply in recent years. That leaves a much smaller group carrying the public responsibilities of the crown. Among them, Anne stands out as the most experienced non-heir. But one important correction matters here. There is no official Princess Royal Regent title currently granted to Anne. Her real constitutional position comes from being Princess Royal and a Councillor of State. Still, the message behind her role is clear. For decades, Anne has avoided drama, stayed out of the spotlight, and simply kept working. And sometimes the most powerful person in a royal institution is not the one making the loudest announcement. It is the one who is still standing when everyone else needs to step back. The headlines may make it sound like Charles suddenly handed Anne a powerful new role. But the legal groundwork was already in place by December 2022. What has changed is the attention. With the king's health making royal backup more important, people are finally noticing the safety net that had been built years earlier. And there is a bigger difference to understand. Legal authority is not the same as personal influence, and never needed a new title to earn respect. For decades, she has built a reputation for being direct, focused, and completely committed to royal duty. She treats the role like a job, not a glamorous lifestyle. That kind of trust cannot be created by Parliament. It has to be earned, and has done that through years of work across charities, military groups, agriculture, engineering, and other organizations. Her long involvement with Save the Children and the Carers Trust shows how wide her responsibilities really are. She does not simply appear for photographs. She studies the issues, remembers details, asks serious questions, and returns to the same causes year after year. That is what makes her different. The 2022 legal change did not create Anne's reputation. It simply gave the constitutional system a way to use the trust she had already spent decades earning. Anne's record shows something simple. She does not treat royal duty as a burden. She has built her life around service, and that becomes especially important when questions arise about the king's future capacity. The Councillors of State Act can help during temporary absences, but a permanent inability to perform the king's core duties would be a different matter. That could require a formal regency under the Regency Act 1937, potentially bringing Prince William into the role of Prince Regent. A formal regency would be a major constitutional event, so the monarchy has another option. Councillors of State can handle certain duties while Charles remains king. Some experts describe this as a soft regency, and that is where Princess Anne matters. William represents the monarchy's future, and represents its stability today, bringing 5 decades of experience. But one point needs to be clear. There is no official royal regent title newly given to Anne. Her authority comes from existing constitutional rules, including the 2022 changes that made her a permanent counselor of state. No grand ceremony,
no dramátic announcement,
just legislation, and in continuing to work. For decades, she has earned something no law can create: trust. And that may be her greatest value to the crown.